My parents told my in-laws where we lived, and they made my girlfriend lose the baby. I lost control when I went to visit my parents, and my brother too. I was 19 when everything I thought I knew about family, love, and life was turned upside down. It feels like it happened in a blur, but it changed me in ways I never expected. At that time, my relationship with my family was nothing short of a war zone. The kind where you're always walking on eggshells, waiting for the next argument, the next disappointment. It wasn't that they hated me. It was more like they had given up on me before I had the chance to show them I was worth anything. You see, my dad was a man of high standards. Tough, stoic, and, let's face it, he expected perfection. And Lucas, my older brother, was the golden child. He had it all. The good grades, the perfect job, the good boy image. In comparison, I was just Pedro, the kid who always seemed to fall short, the one who never quite fit into the mold they had made for me. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. To them, I was a disappointment, a problem they didn't know how to fix. Then came Sophia. It wasn't planned, of course. Nothing ever is when you're that young, right? But when I found out she was pregnant, everything inside me just shifted. I couldn't explain it. There was this rush of panic, sure, but more than that, there was this wave of love and protection I had never felt before. I knew I couldn't let her face this alone. So I decided I was going to step up. To be the man I knew I could be, even if it meant standing up to my parents for the first time in my life. And I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd understand. After all, I was taking responsibility. I was trying to do the right thing. But I couldn't have been more wrong. When I told them, it was like I had slapped them across the face. My dad, who had always been the rock, the unshakable figure in our family, looked at me with disgust. He told me in no uncertain terms that I was throwing my life away for a girl with no values, as if Sophia was somehow to blame for my mistakes. His words stung. But the part that hurt the most wasn't the insults. It was the ultimatum he laid out for me. It's either us or her. Pick. My mom, tears streaming down her face, told me I'd regret this for the rest of my life. She begged me to reconsider, as though abandoning Sophia was some kind of easy fix. But what did she know? It wasn't her life on the line, not her love, not her future. It was mine. So I made my choice. And it wasn't even close. I told them I was leaving. I didn't care if they disowned me. I wasn't going to turn my back on Sophia, not after everything we'd been through. But the real kicker? They did disown me. My dad kicked me out of the house with nothing more than a cold "don't come back." And Lucas? He just stood there, arms crossed, a smug look on his face like he was secretly enjoying this disaster. It was like I had become some sort of joke to him, the screw-up who couldn't get it right. I was on my own now. I didn't have much. No savings. No plan. Just me, Sophia, and this terrifying thing called parenthood ahead of us. But I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let us drown. That's when Jake, my best friend's older brother, came through. He offered me a place to stay, a cheap little apartment in a rundown building. No strings attached. I didn't know how he did it, but I was grateful. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make me feel like I was a burden. He just helped. And then, just as everything seemed like it couldn't get any worse, Sophia's nightmare started. Her family? Well, they were nothing short of a horror show. Her parents were the kind of people who controlled every aspect of her life. What she wore, who she hung out with, even who she was allowed to talk to. When she told them she was pregnant, they flipped. They didn't offer support. They didn't even offer a place for her to stay. They were furious. And not the kind of angry that calms down with time. No, they were manipulative, toxic. They told her she'd ruined everything. And the worst part? They turned violent. I couldn't believe it when she showed up at my apartment, suitcase in hand, a single note left behind for her parents. She'd cut ties, gone, just like that. All we had now was each other, and the road ahead felt like one massive uphill battle. We had nothing. No money, no backup, no one to turn to. But in that moment, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was pissed off, sure, but I also had a fire in me that I didn't know I had before. Sophia and I? We were about to take on the world together. But let me tell you, things were just getting started. Adapting to our new reality wasn't a walk in the park, to put it mildly. It was more like we were thrown into the deep end with no floaties, and we had to learn how to swim. Or drown. I still remember those first few weeks like they were a blur. I was working 2 shifts, barely seeing Sophia, and when I did, it felt like we barely had time to breathe. But we made it work. Somehow, we always found a moment of peace in the chaos. Sophia put her college dreams on hold. She knew we needed the money, and she wasn't the type to just sit around. She got a part-time job, working as a cashier at some small store downtown. I could see how much it was wearing her down, but she never complained. Not once. Every day she would come home exhausted, but she'd still smile and try to make dinner like everything was fine. And I tried too. I worked 2 jobs, one during the day, another at night, just to keep our heads above water. But we always made time for each other, even if it was just a stolen moment before sleep claimed us. We'd laugh about stupid stuff, talk about what we imagined our future would look like, or just hold each other, knowing that we were all the other had. But it wasn't long before the calm we'd found in our little world started to crack. My parents weren't just going to let me go that easily. They had their pride, their reputation, and they were furious that I'd chosen Sophia over them. My dad, with his harsh words and his perfect family ideals, couldn't accept that I had broken away from their carefully constructed life. And Lucas? Well, he was right there, playing the part of the dutiful son. Of course, he was always more than happy to step in and make sure he was the one getting their attention. It was like he thrived on seeing me suffer, and that's when the real trouble started. Sophia and I would be walking home from the store, or sometimes just getting groceries, and I swear every time we turned a corner, there they were, my parents, with Lucas in tow. At first it was just subtle, a comment here, a snide remark there, but it didn't take long for it to escalate. They'd start yelling at Sophia in the street, calling her names, accusing her of ruining my life. My mom would shout about how I'd thrown everything away for a girl who was just after my money, and my dad, well, he had a new insult every time he saw us. They called her a gold digger, a user, a home wrecker. And the worst part? It was public. Everywhere we went, they made sure people heard. Sophia would always look down, eyes filled with tears, trying to keep it together. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. It was like every word they said chipped away at her confidence, at her sense of safety. I wanted to scream, to take her hand and just run, but we had nowhere to go. I couldn't protect her, not in the way I wanted to. One night, things came to a head. We were walking home after her shift, just trying to make it to the apartment without any drama. And there they were again, my dad, my mom, and Lucas. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. But Sophia snapped. I don't know what it was that broke her that night. Maybe it was the constant pressure. Maybe it was seeing how my parents didn't care about her, about us. But when my dad called her something particularly vile, she froze. Her face went pale, and I could see the panic taking over. She grabbed my arm, shaking. Pedro, please. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep facing them. Please help me. In that moment, I didn't even think. I was just consumed with rage. I turned to face my parents, who were standing there like they owned the street, waiting for me to back down. If you come anywhere near her again, I swear I'll call the police. I'll get a restraining order against all of you. You'll never be able to touch her again. I don't even know if I believe the words myself, but I said them. Loud, and I meant them. They backed off that night, but I could feel the simmering hatred in the air. It wasn't over. The next few days were even worse. They didn't just keep their distance. They made sure to send little jabs our way. I'd get calls from random numbers, and when I picked up, it was either my mom or my dad yelling at me for choosing Sophia over them. The worst part? Lucas. He was always the one throwing gasoline on the fire. I swear, he got some twisted pleasure out of making me feel like less than nothing. He'd call, pretending to care, asking how we were doing, then casually slip in some cutting remark about how I'd ruined my life. I knew what he was doing. He wanted to make me feel like I didn't matter, like Sophia and I were nothing more than a joke. Every word out of his mouth felt like a blade. Sophia. She was breaking. I could see it. She started to pull away, trying to keep her distance from everything, from me even. The constant stress, the fear of seeing my family, it was eating away at her. She couldn't go outside without looking over her shoulder. And every time she did, it felt like my heart broke a little more. I kept trying to protect her, but the truth was, I was losing control. Every time I thought things might get better, they'd get worse. The cops couldn't do anything. No one could. My parents had never physically threatened her. They were smart enough for that. But the emotional toll was just as bad, maybe worse. I didn't know how much longer we could keep going like this. I was running out of options, running out of patience, and worse, I was running out of faith in myself. It was one of those rare mornings when I was actually feeling like things might be looking up. Sophia and I had just paid the rent on the apartment, and I'd managed to land a second shift that paid a bit more than usual. Things were tight, but we were making it work. Or at least, that's what I was telling myself. It didn't take long for that small sliver of hope to shatter. Was at work trying to focus on my shift when I got the call. Sophia's voice on the other end was shaking. I couldn't even understand what she was saying at first, just broken words between sobs. But then, she managed to tell me, "They're here, Pedro. They broke in. Your parents. They came in and they're yelling at me. They want me to leave you. They said it's my fault you're ruining your life." My blood ran cold. My hands went numb as I grabbed my things and rushed out of the store, not even bothering to explain to my boss. My only thought was Sophia. She was all that mattered. I didn't know how they'd gotten in. Maybe they had a spare key. Maybe they forced the door open. I didn't care. I just had to get back to her. When I burst through the door of our apartment, there they were. My parents, standing in our tiny living room like they owned the place, like they had a right to be there. Sophia was sitting on the couch, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. "You have no right to be here. Leave her alone." My dad didn't even flinch. He just stood there, arms crossed, like he was some kind of judge. "You're making a mistake, Pedro," he said, his tone cold, like he was trying to teach me a lesson. "You're letting some girl destroy everything you've worked for." Sophia tried to speak, but he cut her off. "You're nothing but a gold-digging tramp who's tricked my son into throwing his life away." I wanted to scream, to punch something, anything. But instead, I took a deep breath. I couldn't let them see me break. Not now. I was supposed to be her protector. I turned to my father, all the anger and frustration bubbling over. "If you don't get out of here right now, I'll call the cops. I'll get a restraining order, and you'll never step foot in this apartment again." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd hit a nerve. But then he just laughed. He laughed at me. "You think the police will do anything? You're nothing but a kid, Pedro. A kid who can't make his own decisions. This is your fault, not hers." The audacity, the sheer cruelty. He was ignoring everything we had gone through. Sophia was shaking beside me, and I could feel her starting to break down again. I couldn't let that happen, not on my watch. But in the end, my father didn't care. They walked out without another word, leaving me standing there, burning with fury, with nothing but empty promises and threats echoing in my ears. The next few days, things got even worse. It wasn't just about the insults anymore. No, now they were hunting us down. Sophia would go to the store to pick up some essentials, groceries, toiletries, whatever, and every time she stepped outside, she'd see them. My parents, my brother, Lucas always lurking in the background, watching, waiting. It was like they had nothing better to do than stalk her, trying to make her life as miserable as possible. It didn't take long before she started feeling like she couldn't go anywhere without being followed. It wasn't just paranoia. It was real. I could see it in her eyes when she came home from a trip to the corner store, her hands trembling, as she locked the door behind her. "They're watching me, Pedro." "They're always watching," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and watch her crumble under the pressure. Went to the police, desperate for a solution. I needed a restraining order. I needed them to stop. But as I sat there in that sterile, cold police station, listening to the officer explain why they couldn't help, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. Without physical evidence or a direct threat of harm, there's nothing we can do, the officer said, shrugging as if it was no big deal. We can't just issue an order based on harassment alone. My heart sank. There it was again, the feeling of helplessness. What was I supposed to do now? How could I protect Sophia if the law couldn't even help us? I left the station feeling like I'd just been kicked in the gut. But I couldn't show it. I couldn't let Sophia see me defeated. I had to be strong for her, even if I didn't know how much longer I could keep it together. Back home, I watched Sophia slowly shrink further and further into herself. She wasn't the same girl I'd fallen in love with, the girl who could smile through anything, the girl who could find joy in the smallest moments. Now, she was always on edge, always looking over her shoulder, scared to leave the house, scared to be alone. I didn't know what else to do. I kept telling myself I was doing everything I could. But deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. Sophia deserved better. We both deserved better. But the question kept ringing in my ears. How far would I go to protect her? And the answer, deep down, terrified me. The moment I'd been dreading, the one I couldn't even bring myself to imagine, finally happened. It wasn't like the last few months had been easy, but I thought we were surviving. I thought we were hanging on, even if by a thread. But then everything shattered. It was one of those mornings that felt like the calm before the storm. Sophia had just gotten back from a therapy session. She had been doing better, slowly, so slowly. But there was still something distant in her eyes, something broken. We were both trying to keep it together. I was trying, for her, for us. But that morning, the storm hit. While I was at work, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. When I picked up, it wasn't Sophia's voice that greeted me. It was her parents. "We know where you are, Pedro." Her father's voice was as cold and flat as a brick wall. "You're going to pay for what you've done to our daughter." I froze. My heart dropped. My stomach churned. How did they find us? How did they know? I should have known. I'd been talking to Jake's brother about a few things. Maybe I'd mentioned where we were living without thinking. Maybe I had let something slip. But I never imagined they'd go this far. The call ended, and I rushed out of the building, panic starting to grip me. I tried calling Sophia, but she didn't pick up. I tried again and again. Nothing. When I got home, I saw their car parked out front. My worst fears were coming true. I ran inside, and what I saw next made my blood run cold. Sophia was on the floor, tears streaming down her face, her eyes wide with terror. Her parents stood over her, shouting, insulting, pushing her, shoving her, like she was some object to be controlled. Her father was the worst, his words cutting like knives, blaming her for everything that had gone wrong in their perfect little world. They were accusing her of ruining everything, of destroying their family. And then it happened. Her mother shoved Sophia to the ground, hard. I heard the sickening sound of her body hitting the floor, and before I could react, Sophia screamed. I don't even know how I managed to move. I don't know how I got across the room, but I did. I rushed over, trying to pull them off her, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Sophia was bleeding. That was it. The moment I'd been dreading, the moment that would define everything that came after. The baby we'd been waiting for, the baby we'd dreamed of, was gone. I remember feeling like I was going to break, like the world was collapsing in on me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only feel the weight of what had just happened, and the overwhelming sense of failure. Sophia, already devastated, didn't even seem to register what had just happened. She was in shock. She couldn't process it. And neither could I. In that moment, everything I'd been holding in just came rushing out. I lost it. I completely lost it. I stormed over to my parents' house, my vision blurred with rage and grief. I didn't care anymore. Nothing mattered but making them feel the pain I was feeling. I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to know what it felt like to lose everything. I broke through the door, tearing through their house in a blind fit of fury. I didn't care about the furniture, the pictures on the walls, the things they'd collected over the years. I destroyed everything in sight, and when I saw Lucas, standing there looking smug as usual, like he couldn't care less about what was happening, something inside me snapped. I hit him. Hard. I don't even know. Why? It wasn't him I wanted to hurt, but I needed him to feel something. Just a fraction of the pain I was going through. The next thing I knew, I was on the ground, hands cuffed behind my back, the weight of what I'd done sinking in. I was arrested. I don't know how long I sat in that cell, but I know I couldn't stop thinking about Sophia. She was still at the hospital, still reeling from what had happened, and I wasn't there. I wasn't there to protect her. I remember Jake's brother coming to bail me out, and the walk back to the hospital felt like a lifetime. When I finally got there, I walked into that sterile, cold room and saw Sophia sitting there, vacant. She wasn't there. Not really. She was staring at the wall, her face blank. I sat down next to her, and for the first time, I wasn't sure how to reach her. She didn't speak. She didn't even look at me. It was like the light inside her had gone out. I wanted to hold her, to tell her that we'd get through this, but the words felt hollow. Nothing felt real anymore. My parents came to the hospital the next day, offering money, offering apologies. They wanted to fix things. But how could they? They couldn't undo the damage they'd caused. I looked at them, at my father, my mother, my brother, and I felt nothing. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I felt empty. I don't want your money, I said, my voice cold. And I don't want your apologies. You can't fix this. You've already destroyed everything. They left, defeated, and I never looked back. It's been a long road, one filled with twists and turns, and I'm still not sure how we got here. But Sophia and I are slowly picking up the pieces. She started therapy shortly after everything happened. It wasn't easy. It wasn't fast. But little by little, I saw her start to come back. I saw that spark in her eyes again, even if it was faint. She decided to go back to school, to rebuild her life. And I started working on my own future. With a little help from some relatives who stuck by me, I opened a small business. It wasn't much at first, but it was something, and it was ours. We moved to a new state, away from the past, away from the ghosts. We're starting over, piece by piece. And as for the wedding, well, we're not rushing it. We're still healing, still figuring out who we are, but we're doing it together. We still mourn the loss of our child. We'll always carry that pain, but we're stronger now. We're a family, our family. As for my parents, they paid the price for what they did. The law took care of them, and I'm not interested in their apologies anymore. I don't need them. I have everything I need right here, with Sophia, and that's enough.